Hi everyone, this is Callie. We're going to be creating a magic slider card today. This is something that we've seen over and over again, but every few months it pops up and it still wows me. So I wanted to create a card to share with you, and it's just a simple pull slider mechanism that reveals a colorful display. So I just wanted to show you what that looks like before we start creating. Today's card uses the Magnolia pattern from Pinkfresh Studio. I have a background cling stamp here that we're going to use for our image, and it's going to be a seamless image. So we have our frame and our background. It's going to be one continuous pattern, and then we have stencils here that I'm going to be using to add color. And as you can see, the stencils do not add color to all of the areas, so it's going to be a fun surprise when we pull out the slider and only certain images are revealed in color. First off, I'm going to be stamping the image, so I've placed my background cling in a standard size MISTI right now, and I'm going to try to position and center my A2 size cardstock as best I can. I have residual adhesive in my MISTI right now, so that's why my paper clung to that. And then I'm going to use some Versaclear Nocturne ink. This is a pigment ink, and I like to use this ink and emboss with clear embossing powder so that my image stays crisp. And usually I prep my cardstock before I start inking up my stamp set, but I'm doing this after because I forgot. So I've prepared that and then re-inked my stamp, and now I'm just pressing the image onto my cardstock. I did this twice to get a good impression, but once I was happy with the impression, I'm going to go ahead and twist my paper off and be careful not to smear any of that ink. And then I'll add some clear embossing powder, and then I'll heat set this panel so that it's ready to go for ink blending. Now before I put everything away, I want to stamp this image one more time on some acetate. I'm just going to position this inside the inked area because I know that that is going to be good enough placement. It doesn't need to be perfect because we can position it perfectly later. I did try to use the same Versaclear ink and try to emboss with clear embossing powder, and it didn't turn out very well. It actually muted the black, so I'm using StazOn Jet Black ink. This is a permanent ink and is great for non-porous surfaces and is great for stamping on acetate. So I'm going to go ahead and set that panel aside and let it dry because the ink is a little sticky at first. So you want to be careful and make sure that you don't smear that ink while it's still wet. All right, so this is the embossed panel that I did on white cardstock, and we're going to be ink blending this. There are 4 layers to the stencil set for the Magnolia, and then 2 stencils for the foliage. So I'm using some coral colors as well as some pink just to create a bit more interest and difference in color gradients. And I'm using some Pinkfresh Studio inks. I haven't had a chance to use these inks in a while, and since I'm using a Pinkfresh Studio product, I thought I would go ahead and use the inks as well since this is a great opportunity to use them. I'm starting off with the lighter coral color. This is Coral Reef. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to switch to the light pink just so we can get some alternate colors in the petals. And this is Sparkling Rose. And then I'll move on to the darker pink. This is Raspberry Bliss. And then last but not least, this is Passion Fruit. And it just gets the darker areas on the stencil layer. Moving on to the foliage, I've got Meadow, and then I also have Aquamarine. So there's a bit of green and a bit of teal, and these layers are super simple. I'm adding a bit of shading, adding a little bit of the darker color at the bottom or bases of each of the foliage and petals, and fade it out with a lighter hand. Now that the stenciling is done, I'm going to carefully peel that away from my stamp and stencil mat, and we have a perfectly good panel here that I'm going to cut a rectangle die into. And the reason for that is because we want that center portion to be our magic slider reveal. And don't worry, because nothing is going to be wasted here. We are going to be using both panels. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that outer frame to help me position that center piece. I'll add some adhesive to that center panel and then inlay it in place and then remove that frame since it was just there as a guide for me to position exactly where that center frame would go. Now on that center frame, we're going to attach this acetate panel. And I'm going to line it up over the panel that I've just adhered down to make sure that it's lined up perfectly over that image. And then we'll add some adhesive onto the frame and then adhere that together so that it sticks itself to that acetate piece. So all of this is just to make sure that everything lines up perfectly. And once that acetate is attached to that frame and we've created a window, I can go ahead and remove this temporary adhesive that I placed on there for alignment purposes. So we have our frame on the right, and then we have everything lining up just perfect. Now what I'm gonna do is trim down this panel. And the reason why I'm trimming it down is not only for a border, which is usually my reasoning, but because I wanna create a pull tab that doesn't overhang over the A2 sized card. So giving myself a 1/4 inch lip at the top so that I can have a pull tab indicator and it won't extend beyond the card base at the top. So I've trimmed it down, and now what we need to do is create a track. You can use foam tape for this, but I recently saw a Jennifer McGuire video where she just stacked up cardstock, and I felt like that was the smarter choice to go since you can kind of control the bulk a little bit more. And so I thought 4 layers would be perfect. So I've trimmed down these little strips of cardstock to fit the sides and the bottom of my frame so that I can create a slider track. So this is just to hold and house that slider portion that we're going to create. And so I'm gluing all of the pieces together. Again, there are 4 stacked up for the sides and bottoms. And then I'll adhere that to the acetate using some double-sided adhesive. I don't know why, but using double-sided dry adhesive makes me feel better against acetate. So again, I'm adhering those tracks along the sides and bottom of my panel. And once that track is in place, I'll measure the space between the side tracks as well as the bottom track and adding a 1/4 inch at the top for my pull tab slider. And that ends up being 3 inches by 5 inches, which is a perfect rounded up whole number. And I wanted the top to be rounded, so I'm using a corner chomper just to round the top before I stamp a pull here indicator using the push here sentiment from a Lawn Fawn set that I have. There are lots of interactive stamp sets that you can use here, and you can even write the word pull. It doesn't need to be stamped. And then I'll go ahead and apply some more adhesive to my tracks so that I can apply this panel over that card base that we've already created, making sure to line up that image perfectly. So once I put my pull tab in, the white will replace the color that's on that bottom panel inside this frame. And then when you pull this pull tab slider out, the color is revealed. Okay, so once our slider portion is done, we can go ahead and finish our card with a sentiment. I'm using a stamp set called Wonderful Sentiments, and there is a foil hot plate that complements this set and coordinating dies as well. I'm just using the stamp set today, and I'm going to emboss it in white over black cardstock. That's my favorite thing to do. And then simply die cut that once I'm done heat setting the sentiment. I'm going to use the same double-sided adhesive tape, again adhering over acetate, my favorite way to adhere paper to acetate, and then I'll center that at the top center of my card, and then that completes my card for today. I really hope you enjoyed this fun technique. You don't have to use a background cling stamp or a full-sized image of any sort. You can create this with any image that you like. However, if you're interested in the products that I used today, be sure to check out the links below where everything will be linked for your convenience, and refer to the coordinating blog post where there will be more details listed as in the colors and combinations that I used if you're interested in that as well. Thanks so much for stopping by, and have a great day, everyone. Bye!